Hey, you can't swim here. This pool's for guests, not outsiders.
I just checked in with my family.
Stop lying. I know who belongs here.
You know who you think belongs here.
Don't get smart with me. I'm calling the front desk.
Go ahead. I'd like them to explain why my presence bothers you more than
You're making this difficult on purpose.
Susan Whitmore thought the pool at the Azure Bay Resort was her private domain. When she saw Darius Coleman standing poolside watching his two sons swim, she didn't see a guest enjoying his vacation. She saw a black man she assumed didn't belong. She confronted him, accused him, and demanded he leave. She had no idea that Darius Coleman was the chief operating officer of Meridian Hospitality Group, the parent company that had just acquired Azure Bay Resort 3 months earlier, or that she was speaking to the man who now controlled every decision about staffing, operations, and who got to keep their jobs at properties across the Southeast. What you just saw was racism dressed up as concern for hotel policy. A woman deciding someone didn't belong based on the color of his skin, not the validity of his room key. You saw the confrontation by the pool. Now we're going to tell you the full story, take you inside that resort from the moment both of them arrived that Saturday morning, and reveal the moment Susan Whitmore walked into the lobby and saw Darius Coleman standing behind the front desk with the general manager, holding her employment file in his hands. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Let's go back to 11 o'clock that Saturday morning at the Azure Bay Resort in Destin, Florida. The resort sits directly on the Gulf Coast, 400 rooms spread across 2 towers connected by tropical gardens and 3 pools. It's the kind of place families save for all year, where the beach is white sand and the water is emerald green and everything costs twice what you expect. The Azure Bay opened in 2008, survived the recession by catering to upper middle class families who wanted luxury without the Miami price tag, and built its reputation on Southern hospitality with premium amenities. Darius Coleman is 37 years old, and he spent the last 15 years working his way up through the hospitality industry with the kind of quiet competence that gets noticed by people who matter. He started as a front desk clerk at a Marriott in Atlanta when he was 22, worked double shifts to put himself through Georgia State's hospitality management program, graduated with honors, and spent 5 years at Hilton Corporate Learning Operations from the inside. At 30, he was recruited by Meridian Hospitality Group as a regional manager, overseeing 12 properties across Georgia and Alabama. At 34, he was promoted to vice president of operations. Last year, at 36, he was named chief operating officer, the youngest COO in Meridian's 40-year history. Meridian owns or manages 63 hotels, resorts, and conference centers across the southern United States, with a combined annual revenue of $800 million. 3 months ago, Meridian acquired the Azure Bay Resort as part of an expansion into the Florida Gulf Coast market. The acquisition cost $42 million. Darius led the due diligence team, negotiated the purchase terms, and now oversees the transition as Azure Bay is rebranded and brought up to Meridian's operational standards. Darius doesn't usually do site visits unannounced, but this weekend is different. He blocked out 4 days on his calendar, told his executive assistant he'd be unreachable, and checked into the Azure Bay Resort under his own name with his wife and 2 sons for what he described in the booking notes as a family vacation. He is on vacation, technically. His wife Maya deserves this trip. His sons, Cameron and Tyler, ages 8 and 6, have been asking to see the beach for months. But Darius is also doing what he always does, observing, evaluating, seeing how the property operates when leadership doesn't know he's watching. He checked in at 10:30 that morning, used his personal credit card, and made no mention of his position with Meridian. The front desk clerk, a young woman named Jessica, was efficient and friendly. She handed him 2 key cards, pointed him toward the elevators, and wished his family a wonderful stay. Darius noted that she smiled at his sons, that she recommended the tiki bar by the pool for lunch, that she treated him exactly the way every guest should be treated. By 11 o'clock, Darius and his family are unpacked and changed into swimwear. Maya takes Cameron and Tyler down to the main pool, while Darius stops by the room to grab sunscreen. He walks down 5 minutes later, wearing navy blue swim trunks, a gray resort polo, and flip-flops. He's carrying a beach bag with towels and water bottles. His sons are already in the pool, bright orange life vests strapped across their chests, splashing near the shallow end while Maya watches from a lounge chair. Darius stands at the edge of the pool, exactly where the security camera mounted on the resort's south tower captures everything that happens next. The camera angle is high and wide, showing the entire pool deck, the The rows of blue and white lounge chairs, the palm trees swaying in the breeze, and the guests scattered around the area. Darius is visible in the center of the frame, his back slightly to the camera, watching his son swim. He's smiling. Cameron is trying to teach Tyler how to float on his back. The water is perfect, the sky is cloudless, and for a moment, Darius allows himself to relax, to be just a father on vacation with his family. That's when Susan Whitmore enters the frame. Susan Whitmore is 52 years old, and she's been the concierge at Azure Bay Resort for 11 years. Her official title is Guest Services Manager, which sounds impressive until you realize that Azure Bay only has one concierge, and her primary job is booking restaurant reservations and arranging dolphin tours for tourists who don't know how to use the internet. Susan treats the position like she's running a 5-star hotel in Monaco instead of a mid-tier beach resort in the Florida Panhandle. She's worked at Azure Bay since 2014, hired during a period when the resort was struggling to compete with newer properties down the coast. Susan sold herself as someone who understood hospitality, who knew how to make guests feel special, who could elevate the Azure Bay experience. What she really brought was an obsessive need to control who belonged where, who had access to what, and who deserved the level of service she was willing to provide. Susan has been at the resort since 9 that morning, her usual Saturday shift. She spent the first hour in the concierge office near the lobby, answering emails and fielding calls from guests asking about beach chair rentals and jet ski availability. Around 10:30, she walked the property, something she does every weekend, inspecting the pools, the restaurants, the common areas, making sure everything meets her standards and that no one is where they shouldn't be. Susan has very specific ideas about who belongs at Azure Bay. She's called security on teenagers she thought were too loud. She's questioned families who look like they might be day visitors sneaking in to use the pool. She's asked to see room keys from people whose presence made her uncomfortable, though she'd never admit that race plays a factor in who makes her uncomfortable and who doesn't. This morning, Susan is wearing her usual work uniform, a navy blue polka dot blouse, white slacks, sensible sandals, and a straw hat that she thinks makes her look approachable and resort appropriate. She's walking the pool deck, surveying her domain, when she sees Darius Coleman standing at the edge of the pool. Her eyes narrow. She doesn't recognize him. She watched the two boys jump in a few minutes ago, and she noted the woman in the lounge chair who seems to be with them, but this man, this black man in casual clothes, standing with no towel, no drink, no visible signs of being a paying guest, he doesn't look like he belongs. Susan makes a decision in the span of 3 seconds. She's going to ask him to leave. She's protecting the resort. She's maintaining standards. She's ensuring that only legitimate guests have access to the amenities that other people paid good money to enjoy. She walks across the pool deck, her sandals clicking against the tile, her expression set in what she thinks is professional concern. The security camera captures her approach. Susan walks directly toward Darius, not hesitating, not second-guessing, completely confident in her authority. Darius doesn't see her coming. He's watching Tyler finally manage to float for 3 seconds before sinking again, and Cameron is clapping and cheering for his brother. Darius is about to call out encouragement when he hears a voice behind him, sharp and accusatory. "Hey, you can't swim here. This pool is for guests, not outsiders." Darius turns, and the camera catches his face perfectly in this moment. Confusion first, the universal human reaction to being told you're not allowed to be somewhere you have every right to be. Then recognition, not of Susan specifically, but of the situation. He's been here before. Different place, different pool, different woman, but the same script, the same assumption, the same exhausting dance. His voice is calm, measured, giving her the benefit of the doubt, even though he already knows where this is going. "I am a guest. I just checked in with my family." Susan crosses her arms, and the body language tells you everything you need to know. She's not listening. She's already decided he's lying. "Stop lying. I know who belongs here." Darius stares at her, and there's a beat of silence where he's making a choice about how to respond, whether to escalate or educate, whether to pull out his room key or let her reveal exactly who she is. He chooses the latter. His voice is quiet, but there's still underneath. "No, you know who you think belongs here." Susan's face flushes. She's not used to being challenged, especially not by someone she's already decided doesn't have the authority to question her. She shifts her weight, her chin tilting up in that defensive posture people adopt when they know they're wrong but refuse to back down. "Don't get smart with me. I'm calling the front desk." Darius almost smiles, but it's not a smile of amusement. It's the smile of someone who knows the punchline to a joke that hasn't been told yet. "Go ahead." I'd like them to explain why my presence bothers you more than the heat. Susan pulls out her phone, but before she can dial, she delivers one more line. The kind of line that sounds reasonable to her, but damning to everyone else. You're making this difficult on purpose. Darius's response is immediate, and his voice carries across the pool deck loud enough that several other guests turn to watch. No, I'm just tired of being treated like a trespasser in places I paid to be. Susan freezes. The other guests are staring now. A couple at the tiki bar has stopped mid-conversation. Maya has stood up from her lounge chair, her expression a mixture of anger and resignation because she's watched her husband deal with this kind of thing more times than she can count. Cameron and Tyler are still in the pool, oblivious, but the tension is thick enough that even the people on the opposite side of the deck can feel it. Susan's finger hovers over her phone screen, and for a split second, she has a chance to walk this back, to apologize, to admit she made an assumption. But Susan Whitmore didn't get to where she is by admitting mistakes. She presses the call button, the front desk answers on the second ring, and Susan launches into her complaint, her voice loud enough for Darius to hear every word. Yes, this is Susan Whitmore from Guest Services. I'm at the main pool and I have a situation. There's someone here who claims to be a guest, but I don't believe he's registered. Can you send security? Yes, I'll wait here. Darius doesn't move. He stands exactly where he is, arms crossed, expression neutral. Maya walks over, and when she speaks, her voice is tight with controlled fury. Do you want me to handle this? Darius shakes his head. No, let it play out. 3 minutes later, 2 security guards arrive, both young men in their 20s, wearing Azure Bay Resort polo shirts and looking deeply uncomfortable with whatever they've been sent to deal with. Susan waves them over, pointing at Darius like he's a criminal who needs to be apprehended. This man refuses to show me his room key and claims he's a guest. One of the security guards, a kid named Brandon, who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else, turns to Darius. Sir, I'm sorry about this. Do you mind showing us your room key? Darius reaches into his pocket, pulls out the key card Jessica gave him at check-in, and hands it to Brandon. Brandon scans it with the handheld device clipped to his belt. The device beeps green. The screen displays Darius's name, room number, and check-in date. Brandon hands the key back, his face flushed with embarrassment. Sir, you're all set. I apologize for the confusion. He turns to Susan, and there's an edge in his voice that wasn't there before. Ma'am, this guest is registered. There's no issue here. Susan's mouth opens and closes like a fish out of water. She looks at the key card, at Darius, at Brandon, and you can see the calculations running through her mind. She was wrong. She accused a paying guest of trespassing. She called security on a black man for standing by a pool with his family. And now there are witnesses. I was just making sure, she stammers. You can't be too careful. There are people who try to use the facilities without paying. Brandon doesn't respond. He and the other security guard walk away, and as they go, Brandon mutters something to his colleague that the camera doesn't pick up, but that makes both of them shake their heads. Susan stands frozen for a moment, then turns and walks quickly toward the lobby, her straw hat slightly askew, her professional composure shattered. Darius watches her go. Maya puts a hand on his arm. You okay? He nods. Yeah, just another Saturday. But Darius Coleman isn't going to let this go. Not this time. He's tired of being profiled, tired of being questioned, tired of watching his sons grow up in a world where their father can be treated like a criminal for standing by a pool. He pulls out his phone and opens his email. He types a message to Paul Hendricks, the general manager of Azure Bay Resort, a man Darius has spoken to exactly twice during the acquisition process. The email is short, professional, and to the point. Paul, this is Darius Coleman, COO of Meridian Hospitality Group. I'm currently on site at Azure Bay as a guest with my family. I've just had an incident with a member of your staff that requires immediate attention. Please meet me in the lobby at 1 p.m. today. This is time sensitive. He hits send. Then he walks over to the pool, crouches down, and calls to his sons. Cameron, Tyler, you guys want ice cream? The boys cheer and swim toward the edge. Darius helps them out of the pool, wraps them in towels, and walks with his family toward the resort's ice cream parlor. He doesn't look back at the pool. He doesn't need to. The camera saw everything, and Paul Hendricks is about to find out exactly what kind of hospitality his staff is providing. Paul Hendricks is 49 years old, and he's been the general manager of Azure Bay Resort for 6 years. He's good at his job, knows how to keep occupancy rates high, knows how to manage budgets and maintain relationships with local vendors, and keep the corporate owners happy. When Meridian acquired Azure Bay 3 months ago, Paul was nervous about his future. New ownership often means new management, but Meridian kept him on. told him they valued his experience, and gave him a mandate to maintain operations while they implemented their systems. Paul is in his office on the second floor of the administrative building when he sees Darius's email come through. He reads it once, then reads it again, and his stomach drops. COO of Meridian Hospitality Group, on site as a guest, incident with staff, time sensitive. Paul knows exactly what this means. One of his employees screwed up, and they screwed up with the one person who has the authority to fire everyone from Paul himself down to the housekeeping staff. Paul immediately calls the front desk. Jessica, this is Paul. I need you to pull up the registration for a guest named Darius Coleman. Tell me everything. Jessica types quickly. Darius Coleman, checked in this morning at 10:30. Suite 847, Ocean View, 4-night stay, 2 adults and 2 children. Paid with personal credit card. No special requests or notes on the reservation. Did he identify himself as Meridian Corporate? No, sir. He checked in like any other guest. Paul hangs up and calls the head of security. Mike, I need the security footage from the main pool starting at 11 o'clock this morning. Send it to my email immediately. The footage arrives 7 minutes later. Paul watches the entire encounter. He watches Susan approach Darius. He watches her accuse him. He watches her call security. He watches Brandon verify the room key and Susan's humiliated retreat. Paul closes his laptop and puts his head in his hands. In his 6 years as general manager, he's dealt with guest complaints, staff conflicts, and minor incidents. But he's never had a senior executive from the parent company racially profiled by one of his own employees while on site as a paying guest. Paul knows what he has to do. He picks up the phone and calls Susan's extension. Susan, this is Paul. I need you in my office immediately. Susan arrives 8 minutes later, still flustered, still trying to process what happened at the pool. She knocks on Paul's door and steps inside, expecting sympathy, expecting Paul to understand that she was just doing her job, just protecting the resort's interests. Paul doesn't offer her a seat. He stands behind his desk, arms crossed, his expression colder than Susan has ever seen it. Tell me what happened at the pool. Susan launches into her version of events, her voice defensive, her words carefully chosen to make herself sound reasonable. I saw someone at the pool who didn't appear to be a registered guest. I approached him to verify his status. He became combative and refused to cooperate, so I called security. It turned out he was a guest, but I was just following protocol. Paul lets her finish. Then he opens his laptop, turns it around so Susan can see the screen, and plays the security footage. Susan watches herself approach Darius. She hears her own voice saying, "You can't swim here. This pool is for guests, not outsiders." She watches herself accuse him of lying. She watches the entire confrontation play out exactly as it happened, and by the end, her face has gone pale. Paul stops the video. "Susan, do you know who that man is?" Susan shakes her head, not trusting her voice. "That's Darius Coleman. He's the chief operating officer of Meridian Hospitality Group. He's the executive who led the acquisition of this resort. He's the person who decides whether you, me, and everyone else at this property keeps their jobs. And you just racially profiled him in front of his family and other guests." The words hit Susan like a physical blow. She tries to speak, tries to explain, but Paul isn't finished. "You approached a black man who was doing nothing wrong and accused him of trespassing. You called him an outsider. You assumed he didn't belong because of what he looked like, not because of any legitimate security concern. And then you doubled down by calling security even after he told you he was a guest. This isn't protocol, Susan. This is discrimination. And you've put this resort and Meridian in a position of significant legal liability." Susan finds her voice, and it comes out small, desperate. "I didn't mean it that way. I was just trying to protect the property." Paul shakes his head. "I'm placing you on immediate suspension pending a full investigation. You're to leave the property now and not return until you hear from HR. If you speak to any other staff members about this incident, your termination will be immediate." Susan's legs feel weak. She grips the back of the chair in front of her. "Paul, please. I've been here 11 years, and in one morning, you've undone all of it. Leave your access badge on my desk and go." Susan places her badge on the desk with shaking hands and walks out of Paul's office. She makes it to her car in the employee parking lot before she starts to cry. Not because she understands what she did wrong, but because she understands that she's about to lose everything. At 1 o'clock, Paul Hendricks walks into the lobby and sees Darius Coleman standing near the concierge desk. Darius is wearing khaki shorts and a white linen shirt, casual vacation attire, but there's nothing casual about his expression. Paul approaches with his hand extended, his voice apologetic before he even reaches Darius. "Mr. Coleman, I'm Paul Hendricks, the general manager. I cannot apologize enough for what happened this morning." Darius shakes his hand, but his grip is firm, his eyes hard. "What exactly did happen, Paul, from your perspective?" Paul takes a breath. One of my staff members, Susan Whitmore, our guest services manager, approached you at the pool and questioned whether you were a registered guest. She called security despite you being a paying customer. I've reviewed the security footage. Her actions were completely unacceptable and rooted in racial bias. She's been suspended pending termination. Darius nods slowly. And what happens now? Paul hesitates. Mr. Coleman, I want to assure you that this kind of behavior is not tolerated at Azure Bay. We're going to conduct a full review of our staff training, implement mandatory bias and inclusion education, and ensure this never happens again. Darius's voice is quiet but carries an edge that makes Paul understand this conversation is far from over. Paul, I didn't identify myself when I checked in because I wanted to see how this property operates when corporate isn't watching. What I saw this morning is that your staff feels comfortable racially profiling guests in broad daylight with cameras recording everything. That's not a training issue. That's a culture issue. Paul swallows hard. You're absolutely right. And we're going to fix it. Darius looks at him for a long moment. Here's what's going to happen. Susan Whitmore is terminated, effective immediately. No severance beyond what's legally required. Second, every member of your staff undergoes mandatory anti-bias training within the next 30 days. Third, Azure Bay implements a zero tolerance policy for discrimination, and that policy is posted in every employee break room and common area. Fourth, you're going to issue a formal written apology to my family. And fifth, you're going to personally ensure that the 2 security guards who responded this morning understand they did nothing wrong and that we appreciate their professionalism. Paul nods at each point. Absolutely. All of that will be done. And Paul, if I hear about another incident like this at any Meridian property, not just Azure Bay, but anywhere in our portfolio, there will be consequences for leadership. Do you understand? I understand completely, Mr. Coleman. Darius extends his hand again. Good. Now, I'm going to go back to my vacation with my family. I expect those changes to be in motion by Monday morning. They shake hands, and Darius walks back toward the elevators. Paul watches him go, then returns to his office to begin drafting the termination paperwork for Susan Whitmore and the policy changes that Darius just mandated. Susan Whitmore is officially terminated 3 days later. The termination letter cites violation of company anti-discrimination policies and conduct unbecoming of a hospitality professional. She receives 2 weeks of severance pay, the minimum required by Florida law. Her personnel file is flagged with a note that she was terminated for cause, which means any future employer who calls for a reference will get dates of employment and nothing more. Susan spends the next 2 months applying for similar positions at hotels and resorts across the Florida Panhandle. She gets 3 interviews. 2 of them end abruptly when the interviewer calls Azure Bay for a reference and hears the carefully worded non-recommendation. The 3rd interview seems to go well until the hiring manager Googles her name and finds a local news article about Meridian Hospitality Group implementing new anti-discrimination policies at their properties following an incident at Azure Bay Resort. The article doesn't name Susan, but the timeline matches, and the hiring manager decides to go with another candidate. Susan eventually finds work as a receptionist at a dental office in Fort Walton Beach, making $18 an hour, less than half what she earned at Azure Bay. She tells people she left hospitality to try something new, but the truth sits heavy in her chest every time she thinks about the pool, the man she assumed didn't belong, the moment she pressed that call button. Darius Coleman finishes his vacation at Azure Bay Resort. He takes his sons to the beach every day. He and Maya have dinner at the resort's seafood restaurant overlooking the Gulf. On the last morning, Tyler asks if they can come back next year, and Darius promises they will. Because Azure Bay is part of his company now, and he's going to make sure it's a place where every guest, regardless of what they look like, is treated with dignity and respect. 6 weeks after the incident, Meridian Hospitality Group settles a formal complaint filed by Darius Coleman on behalf of himself and his family. The settlement includes a written apology from Azure Bay Resort, a full refund of the vacation costs, and a donation of $75,000 to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. The settlement terms are confidential, but Darius makes sure the donation is public. He wants people to know that discrimination has consequences, that companies will be held accountable, and that $75,000 is a small price to pay for the lesson Azure Bay needed to learn. The policy changes Darius mandated are implemented across all 63 Meridian properties within 90 days. Every employee, from housekeepers to general managers, undergoes 8 hours of anti-bias training. The company creates a confidential hotline for reporting discrimination. They revised their guest services protocols to explicitly prohibit staff from questioning guests' right to use facilities without specific evidence of policy violations. And they add a new core value to Meridian's mission statement. We welcome everyone, and we mean everyone. Paul Hendricks keeps his job, but barely. He's placed on a performance improvement plan and told that any future incidents of discrimination at Azure Bay will result in his immediate termination. He takes the warning seriously. He attends every training session himself. He walks the property every weekend, not to police who belongs where, but to make sure his staff is treating every guest with the same level of service regardless of their appearance. Darius doesn't think about Susan Whitmore often. He's too busy. Meridian is expanding into new markets. He's overseeing the acquisition of 2 more properties in South Carolina. He's mentoring 3 young Black executives who are navigating the hospitality industry and dealing with their own versions of what happened at the pool. But sometimes, when he's at one of Meridian's properties, he'll stand by a pool and watch families swim. And he'll remember that Saturday morning in Destin, the look on Susan's face when she realized she'd called security on her boss, the moment she understood that her assumptions had cost her everything. Darius believes in second chances, but he also believes in accountability. Susan Whitmore had 11 years to learn that you don't approach guests based on their skin color. She had countless opportunities to treat people with respect regardless of how they looked. She chose differently. She chose to see a Black man and assume he was an outsider. And when the consequences came, they came swiftly, publicly, and permanently. The story spreads through the hospitality industry quickly. People in hotels and resorts across the Southeast whisper about the concierge who profiled the COO. It becomes a cautionary tale, a reminder that you never know who you're talking to, that assumptions can end careers, and that the person you dismiss today might be the person who signs your termination papers tomorrow. The security footage from that morning is never released publicly, but it's shown in every Meridian training session as an example of what not to do. Employees watch Susan approach Darius. They hear her say, "outsiders." They watch the encounter escalate. And then the trainer pauses the video and asks the question that every person in hospitality should be asking themselves. What did this employee see that made her think this guest didn't belong? The answer is always the same. She saw his skin color. She saw her own bias. She saw what she expected to see instead of what was actually there. A father watching his son swim, a guest enjoying a vacation, a human being with every right to be exactly where he was. If this story taught you anything, let it be this. Access shouldn't be policed by appearance. Darius Coleman earned his position through 15 years of excellence in hospitality. He earned his vacation by working 80-hour weeks. He earned the respect of his industry by treating everyone, from front desk clerks to fellow executives, with dignity. Susan Whitmore spent 11 years gatekeeping, deciding who looked like they belonged and who didn't. And in 3 minutes by a pool, she revealed that her standards had nothing to do with hotel policy and everything to do with prejudice. Your character isn't revealed in how you treat people who look like you, who come from your background, who make you comfortable. It's revealed in how you treat people who don't, who challenge your assumptions, who make you question whether your biases are more important than your professionalism. Darius Coleman stood by a pool watching his children swim. Susan Whitmore saw a threat that didn't exist. And by the time the security guards verified his room key and Susan realized her mistake, it was already too late to take back her words, her accusations, her career. The pool is for guests, all guests. And the woman who forgot that learned the most expensive lesson of her professional life. The person you profile today might be your boss tomorrow. And when that happens, when the power dynamic flips and the truth comes out, no amount of apologies or excuses can save you from the consequences you brought on yourself. The security cameras captured everything. The investigation confirmed what everyone already knew. And Susan Whitmore's 11 years at Azure Bay Resort ended because she spent 3 minutes proving that she valued her assumptions more than a guest's dignity. The cameras don't lie, and neither do the people who watch them later, review the footage, and understand exactly what happened by that pool on a sunny Saturday morning in Destin, Florida.